Hello, welcome back to my channel. Before we dive in, I want to mention that the material I'm about to share today is quite lengthy. However, I sincerely hope you stick with it until the end because the knowledge I'm about to teach can't be bought with money. This information is incredibly valuable and something you won't find anywhere else. The technique I'll be discussing today comes from a street con artist, not from books or teachings by some university professor. This means the method has been tested in real life and proven effective. Why is that? The reason is simple. Academics and professionals may have the ability to manipulate, but they don't rely on those skills to survive. On the other hand, street hustlers depend on manipulation techniques as their primary means of meeting their daily needs. If they fail, they don't eat. Therefore, in this video, I will teach you strategies that have been used and proven effective in real-life situations, techniques that can help you influence others to act according to your wishes. Now, I'm going to share a few stories, and I want you to try to imagine that you're the main character in these scenarios. Afterward, think about how you'd manipulate the situation yourself, then compare it to the techniques I'll be teaching. Imagine one evening you have a dinner date with a beautiful woman named Emily. You're not entirely sure how the night will end, but there's a possibility that after dinner, you and Emily might continue somewhere else. During dinner, the conversation flows smoothly. Emily laughs every time you crack a joke, and the atmosphere feels pleasant. Things are getting more comfortable, so you both order a bottle of wine to accompany the conversation. As time passes, you start to feel more relaxed. Maybe it's just your imagination, but Emily seems to be showing signs of being more affectionate and playful. You become increasingly confident that the night could still progress further. Encouraged by the courage brought on by the alcohol, you jokingly say, "Emily, how about we continue our chat at the Shangri-La Hotel? It's pretty late anyway, and I can drop you off at home tomorrow morning." However, Emily's expression changes. She looks surprised and responds, "Are you kidding?" As her response sinks in, you sense a shift in the dynamic between you two. Emily starts to distance herself and exhibits body language indicating discomfort. She then says, "I have to work tomorrow." At this point, I want you to think, what steps could you take to change Emily's mind and convince her to agree to continue the night at the hotel? Now, let's move on to the second scenario. Imagine you've just been hired as a marketing executive, replacing someone who previously held the position. The previous employee quit due to issues with one of the company's biggest clients, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson is a successful billionaire in the construction and materials industry. Before the previous employee resigned, he was handling a $3 million contract to market Mr. Johnson's company through a TV station. The commercial filming process was already underway, and how the ad would be broadcast had already been determined beforehand. As you're continuing the marketing process, your boss calls with an urgent request. Mr. Johnson wants his son included in the commercial. You now face a dilemma. The production of the commercial is already in progress, and you can't simply ask the TV station to change the agreed-upon concept. However, your boss is pressuring you to convince Mr. Johnson to stick to the terms of the contract. Now, the question is, how do you change Mr. Johnson's mind? While you think about the solution, I'll explain 6 effective steps to influence someone to act according to your wishes. Step 1. Build rapport and make the target like you. The first step in influencing someone is to establish rapport and make them like you. If you haven't built a connection with the target, any attempt at manipulation will be futile. People are more easily influenced when they feel close and comfortable with you. It's human nature to trust those we consider friends. Now, let's apply this principle to the cases of Mr. Johnson and Emily. Case study: Mr. Johnson. How do you build a relationship with Mr. Johnson? If I were in your shoes, I'd start the conversation with topics that are likely to interest him, namely, his achievements in business and his journey as a self-made billionaire. Psychologically, most people have a narcissistic tendency and want to be acknowledged. By discussing these topics, Mr. Johnson is likely to become engaged and open up during the conversation. As we talk, I'd try to understand his mindset. For instance, if he subtly indicates dissatisfaction with employee welfare, I could adjust my approach to align with his views. Though it may sound unethical, my primary goal is to build rapport so he feels we share similar perspectives. However, one thing to keep in mind, this technique must come across as genuine. Someone as experienced as Mr. Johnson can easily spot when someone is trying to manipulate him too obviously. Therefore, practice and experience are crucial to applying this strategy effectively. If minor disagreements or conflicts arise during the conversation, I'd steer clear of them temporarily and find another topic that feeds his ego. Psychologically, this technique will make Mr. Johnson unconsciously view me as someone who shares his way of thinking. Thus, when I bring up the issue of the commercial, he'll see me not as someone opposing him, but as a friend who usually agrees with him, except in this case. Case study: Emily. The approach for Emily is essentially the same as for Mr. Johnson. You need to find out what she likes and position yourself as someone who shares her interests. For example, if Emily is into Korean culture, you could discuss it in depth so she feels you share similar interests. The ultimate goal is to create a connection that makes Emily feel you're someone who truly matches her or even considers you a soulmate. Throughout this process, it's important not to directly address the end goal, in this case, inviting her to the hotel. If the discussion moves too quickly or overtly, she might feel hesitant or reject the idea. However, by building closeness subtly, she'll be more easily influenced. If you want to delve deeper into this technique, you can watch the episode that discusses favoritism for a more detailed understanding. Step 2. Identify the reason for rejection and listen carefully. The next step in influencing someone is understanding the main reason preventing them from agreeing to your request. Many people try to manipulate without truly knowing the cause of the target's rejection. As a result, they tend to talk too much, over-explain, or even dominate the conversation without listening first. This can lead to arguments and make the target even harder to influence. On the other hand, by staying silent and listening, you can avoid these mistakes. Additionally, by listening, you can determine whether the reasons given by the target are logical or just excuses. Regardless of how illogical the reasons may seem, it's important to remain calm and not confront the target directly. When you listen, focus on identifying one or two primary reasons behind their rejection. By understanding these reasons, you can determine the best way to address them. Moreover, when someone feels heard and understood, they're more easily influenced. Example case: Mr. Johnson. After building rapport with Mr. Johnson and starting to discuss the commercial, he might respond with statements like, "You guys are too arrogant, unwilling to listen to anyone else's opinion." At this point, you might feel the urge to immediately counter his statement, but a more effective approach is to let him speak further. Listen calmly, without interrupting. As the conversation continues, Mr. Johnson might say, "I'm sure my son is more suitable for this commercial than those unknown actors." Let him keep talking. From here, you can identify the main obstacle in this negotiation. After he finishes speaking, use the technique I taught earlier by asking a simple question: "Is there any other reason?" Mr. Johnson might then respond, "I want my son to appear on TV. He's my only child and I love him dearly." At this point, you've successfully identified the core reason behind his desire. It's not just about business, but also about his personal feelings toward his son. Understanding this, You now know the main hurdle you need to overcome to influence Mr. Johnson's decision. Example. Case. Emily. When you invite Emily to continue the night at the Shangri-La Hotel, she rejects your suggestion with a response like, "Are you kidding?" Then she adds another reason. "I have to work tomorrow." At this stage, it's important to encourage her to elaborate further and reveal any additional reasons she might not have mentioned outright. If you listen carefully, she might provide details such as, "I have to wake up at 5 a.m., take a shower, prepare breakfast," and so on. After she finishes speaking, use the same technique as in the Mr. Johnson case by asking, "Is there any other reason?" Emily might then respond, "Do you see that guy over there? He's my coworker. I'm afraid he'll see me and spread rumors at the office." From here, you've successfully identified the biggest reason behind her rejection. She's concerned about her reputation at work. After uncovering the main obstacles in both cases, you're now ready to move on to step 3 in the technique of influencing someone. Step 3. Acknowledge feelings and feed the target's ego. After the target rejects your request with various reasons, the next step is crucial. This is the most sensitive stage in the persuasion process because one wrong word choice can ruin everything. However, if done correctly, you'll likely achieve 60% of your manipulation goal. Before asking someone to do something according to your wishes, it's essential to understand their feelings and feed their ego first. When someone's ego is satisfied, their defenses weaken, making them more open to what you have to say. Feeding the ego by understanding. Feelings, not perspectives. Often, we hear someone say, "Yeah, you're right, but..." If your target responds this way, it means you haven't successfully fed their ego. Usually, this phrase arises when someone feels their perspective isn't sufficiently valued. If their ego isn't satisfied, they'll dig their heels in, making the persuasion process more difficult. The best way to feed the target's ego is to show empathy for their feelings. For example, saying something like, "I understand, I've felt that way too," can create a sense of connection and make the target more comfortable. You can follow up with, "You're not wrong," and share a similar experience you've had. If done correctly, the target will begin to feel that you share similarities with them, which subconsciously builds emotional closeness. Example. Case. Mr. Johnson. For instance, Mr. Johnson gets angry and says, "Rather than using actors with scandals who may not even increase my revenue, it's better to feature my son. I'm sure he's more suitable." Instead of immediately countering, you can respond more tactfully. "I get it, sir. Honestly, I'm not a fan of celebrities either." Then, you can add a personal experience that reinforces the impression that you understand his perspective. "I've never really been interested in the world of celebrities or public figures. It's important to note that you don't need to agree with all aspects of his viewpoint." In this case, Mr. Johnson has two main points. He dislikes scandalous actors and he wants his son featured on TV. You don't need to agree with both points, just show that you also dislike actors in general. By doing so, he'll feel you share common ground, making him more open to further discussion. If Mr. Johnson responds again with, "Yes, but I still want my son to appear on TV because I'm sure he's suitable," you've successfully made him more receptive to your arguments moving forward. Case study. Emily and managing emotions in manipulation. When someone rejects your request, it's important to stay calm and avoid confrontation. Effective manipulation requires strong self-control. Avoiding conflict isn't just a wise strategy. It also allows you to maintain control of the situation. When someone speaks aggressively or belittles you, don't let your emotions get the better of you. Often, individuals who act rudely are actually insecure. They use aggression as a defense mechanism. In situations like this, there are two approaches you can take. 1. If the target is weaker than you, ignore them. 2. If the target is stronger or influential, understand their ego and use empathy to ease the tension. In Emily's case, where an assistant acts defensively, it's important to recognize that women tend to be more expressive when rejecting something they disagree with. If you push without understanding the reason behind her rejection, she's likely to respond sharply. Therefore, stay calm. If you have a sense of humor, use it appropriately to lighten the mood before attempting to understand her ego. Step 4. Emphasize common ground. This step focuses on finding and highlighting similarities between you and the target. Psychologically, humans tend to be more open to people who share similar thoughts or goals. Therefore, by continuously reinforcing shared viewpoints through patterns established in Step 3, you'll gain more of the target's trust. At this point, you start to have some control over the direction of the conversation. Of course, you won't agree with everything the target says. However, there will always be certain aspects that serve as common ground. This is where you need to emphasize that agreement. Example. Case, Mr. Johnson. In a discussion with Mr. Johnson, you can emphasize shared objectives by saying, "Sir, we both agree that our primary goal is to make this commercial successful and increase your company's sales. That's why I'm here, to ensure this campaign succeeds and brings benefits to your business." In this statement, you're repeating 2 key points. 1. Making this commercial successful. 2. Bringing benefits to your company. By highlighting these agreed-upon elements, Mr. Johnson will be more open to the suggestions you offer. Example case. Emily. In the situation with Emily, a similar approach can be applied. "So that's how it is, Em. I also don't want to force anything, especially if it could cause problems for you at the office." This sentence shows that you understand her concerns and support her interests. When someone feels understood, they naturally become more flexible and easier to negotiate with. Once the target begins to soften, it's time to move on to Step 5. Step 5. Counter arguments by reinforcing your truth. At this stage, you should already understand the main reason why the target rejected your request. If not, revisit Step 2. Listen carefully. Factually, you don't need to address all objections raised by the target. Just resolve 1 or 2 major reasons that are obstacles, and the smaller ones will naturally fall into place. If Steps 3 and 4 have been executed correctly, the target's defenses will weaken. That's when you can start introducing your ideas or opinions into their mind. However, proceed cautiously to avoid triggering greater resistance. Example case. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson's main reason for rejecting is that he wants his son featured in the commercial. Convincing him without causing anger is no easy task, but there are effective ways to do it. For example, you could say, "Sir, I'm sure 90% of the commercial's audience will enjoy seeing your son. However, in the current situation, there are other factors to consider. The actor we've chosen is very popular. Despite some scandals, the public still views them as credible and trustworthy. Additionally, they have a background in construction, which aligns with your business. By choosing this actor, our reach will be much broader. And the broader the reach, the greater the potential profit for your company." Psychological trick. After providing this explanation, repeat the following statement. "However, sir, I'm fully prepared to execute the commercial according to your wishes because the most important thing is client satisfaction and ensuring we deliver the best benefits for you." This statement serves several purposes. Highlighting. Benefits. You're emphasizing that the decision isn't based solely on personal preference, but for the company's benefit. Applying the "I don't need you, but you need me" technique. By stating readiness to follow Mr. Johnson's wishes, you're subtly showing that your side isn't entirely dependent on him. Rather, Mr. Johnson needs your more effective marketing strategy. Reversing perception. When someone feels they need you more than the other way around, they tend to respect and value your input more. Human nature dictates that people respect and listen more to someone who doesn't seem overly dependent on them. If Mr. Johnson begins to realize that your team is the best solution for him, he's more likely to accept your advice and even appreciate the decision. Example case. Emily. In Emily's case, her primary reason for rejecting is fear of becoming office gossip. The approach could be as follows. Yes, you're right, Em. If we force this, the risks are significant. Up to this point, you're acknowledging and accommodating her ego. Then continue with a statement that shows you're not overly dependent on her decision. But it's entirely up to you. Whatever happens next is your call. Whatever you decide, I can understand. This approach follows the principle that in negotiations, the person in a stronger position is the one who can make the other party feel that they don't desperately need the outcome of the negotiation. If this step works, the target will be more receptive to your perspective. Now we can move on to step 6. Step 6. Preserve the target's dignity and create a comfortable situation for compromise. Success in negotiation or persuasion often hinges on how willing the other party is to accept our perspective. However, psychologically, admitting fault isn't easy for most people. Therefore, this step focuses on preserving the target's dignity so they don't feel cornered when considering changing their stance. One effective way to achieve this is by deliberately acknowledging a small mistake that doesn't impact the main objective. By doing this, the target will feel more comfortable and less embarrassed if they eventually need to change their decision. When someone feels they've won in a conversation, they tend to be more open to alternative perspectives and more flexible in decision-making. In Mr. Johnson's case, for example, if we've successfully applied the previous 5 steps, we're likely in a favorable position in the negotiation. However, the final challenge is getting him to accept the solution we're offering. Since Mr. Johnson's primary reason is his desire to feature his son in the commercial, we could propose a compromise, such as creating an additional commercial with a smaller budget for digital media, print, or other promotions. With this approach, Mr. Johnson gets what he wants while the main marketing strategy we designed can still proceed as planned. In Emily's case, who's worried about her co-workers' perceptions? A similar approach can also be applied. By openly acknowledging her concerns, we can build trust and then offer a compromise that makes her more comfortable, such as adjusting the timing or conditions to avoid unwanted attention. Conclusion: 6 effective steps in negotiation and persuasion. By understanding and applying these 6 steps, the chances of reaching a mutually beneficial agreement will significantly increase. 1. Building rapport. Create comfort and trust in communication. 2. Listening attentively. Give the target space to express their thoughts. 3. Understanding and feeding the target's ego. Ensure they feel valued and heard. 4. Highlighting shared perspectives. Reinforce points of agreement to build trust. 5. Countering objections convincingly. Present logical arguments without making the target feel cornered. 6. Preserving the target's dignity. Help them accept new perspectives without feeling humiliated. By mastering these strategies, we can enhance our effectiveness in negotiations, build better relationships, and ensure smoother communication. Additionally, understanding these techniques can help us recognize and avoid manipulative tactics others might use against us. Thank you for following along with this discussion. Don't forget to keep practicing and developing your communication skills.